have all these parts. And because we have all these parts, there's a ton of emotion that the parts are experiencing all the time, right? Like, do any of you experience sadness? Do any of you ever feel rage, like you would like to murder somebody, or many people? And if you don't ever feel rage, then that means you don't allow that in you, because we are a multipalative. So just notice if you don't. Hold your hand up for that one. Do any of you ever feel terror? Do any of you ever feel intense desire? Okay. So we are full of emotion, and there's so much of us that gets caught in reactivity, you know, craving, grabbing, wanting, aversive, you know, protective, fighting, defensive, right? This is all within us. And what do we do with it? It is true that sometimes when you unhook and you shift mind, you'll feel it all settle and almost dissolve away, or that can happen. That happens a lot for me. If I unhook, it's like the energy first dissolves and then it coheres into its true form, which is love and bliss and coherence. So that is one truth, and definitely one we practice. But there's also the reality that if we can't get all the way to there, and if we are caught in our emotions, it's really, really dangerous if we suppress them. Do you guys get that? What do you think happens when you suppress emotions?
When you suppress, it turns into matter. So it like solidifies in the body.
Right. So one thing is emotions, which tend to be energy based, then will affect the form. So suppressed emotions can make you sick and really impact your body. What else? What happens when you suppress emotions?
Anything build on top of that emotion will sort of be it'll be in a distortion, basically.
Right. So our emotions actually distort our thoughts. Do you guys know that? It's not just that our thoughts create negative emotions. Our negative emotions will bend our thinking. And then if we create things from those negative emotions, it's like it's on an unstable ground. Okay, what else?
They're going to express through our denial. And so we're not actually going to have a manager online able to have a tree to manage it in a way that's not harmful for ourselves or other people. So it's kind of gone wild without our awareness.
Right. So when we suppress or deny our emotions, the emotions don't go away. They just find other routes, right? They'll come out in passive aggressive forms. They'll come out in, you know, forms that are pretending that they're for something good, but they're actually infused with all the negative emotion that didn't get processed. You guys, can you relate to that? Have you seen that? Felt that? Because you can't actually suppress an emotion or deny it. If it's still there and unexpressed, that energy will find a new pathway. Beautiful. Anything else?
From an IFS perspective, the denying and the repressing of emotion just increases the emotional burden and the beliefs that our exiled parts carry, our vulnerable, wounded parts.
Right, right. So the experiences we had in our early life, they didn't just set up belief patterns, they actually store emotion that if it isn't metabolized, lives, for me, I think it doesn't just live in the body, I think it lives in the body field. So there's an idea from Buddhism, it's called the karmic storehouse. And in that particular model, it's all the stored experience, not just because your body is the collective body, so that there's a place where every negative, unprocessed thing lives. All the belief patterns and all of the energy that's unprocessed and unmetabolized just hangs out. And it keeps recreating reality from it. So all the unprocessed beliefs and emotions that we have, they actually create the obscurations and that block us from our true nature, and then they actually generate reality. Like we're living in all this unprocessed mind, and then that mind keeps recreating samsara, samsara, samsara. And nirvana, or the kingdom of heaven, is truth and is here, but we're so caught in the clouds of this unprocessed mind that it just keeps generating hell over and over again. And then we're living in that hell. Yeah? Whew, that's kind of heavy. So what are we going to do about it? What are we going to do? Okay, so in Luminous, we have two primary things that we do. One is you continually unhook from the samsaric mind, and you find that which is beyond it, that is this pure awareness that's always here, that's stainless, that cannot be harmed, that cannot be stained, that is never of that mind. And from that ground, you view everything, and then it purifies it and brings it into its true nature, which is coherence, love, and bliss, right? So that's the primary thing, is unhook from the mind that's generating it, get beyond it into the mind that is your own mind, God's mind, the pure mind, and bring all of that stuff into those baptismal waters of the pure mind, purify it, cleanse it, transform it into its true essence, right? So that's our primary thing that we do at Luminous. And part of the way we do that is we also make space for the emotions and the energies to process, so that there is container for all these parts of us that we often suppress, hide, don't allow, have no way to metabolize. So what we do is we shift into awareness, but in relational practices, we create spaces for all the content to come into the light of awareness without inhibition, right? Because how many of you, even this weekend, we've talked a lot about shame. How many of you have parts that you just don't want anyone to know about, or emotions that you never share because in a relational space, people would react to them if you had them. But then they stay in your body field and they're constantly affecting everything because there's no safe space or no container for this energy, this emotion to process. You get that? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one of the things we do is we create containers because we understand that everything does need to process, right? That we actually need a space to bring it out and allow it. And those containers, we hold air, emptiness, awareness that's not caught in it, that's not of it, that understands it's not solid, not real, not true. And we hold water, which embraces it and connects with it so it feels felt and acknowledged, right? And there's another piece of water that's really important that I haven't emphasized as much, which is receive. Do you know, at Luminous, we always used to do this thing where we would teach people to express their anger, and they'd go get a bat and they'd beat a pillow, and we'd teach them the pathway of anger. And that's really powerful because it teaches you to let that energy flow. For some of us, we can't let our anger flow. Other people can't let their sadness flow. But one of the things that I've learned, and to be honest, I learned this from Ethan's work by experimenting with him, and then it started showing up in everything, is we have a need energetically to be received. Ethan's going to teach this in his lab later today. If you can move into a receptive state and breathe and take in when someone is emoting, but there's this thing where this thing that wants to express, wants to be met, heard, taken in, and that completes it. That lets it complete itself. So most of the time when someone's angry at us, our natural defense system either wants to push back, don't you fucking be angry at me, or it wants to run away, or deny, or get away from, because it's intensity. There's a lot of intensity in that emotion. And all the parts of us that have shame are afraid that something's wrong with us and that they're going to point it out. The problem with that is the anger never ends. Because anger needs to be received. And what happens is as anger is actually like listened to and received and can be taken in without resistance, what happens is it converts to its nature, because anger is actually just the distortion of clarity. Clarity is truth, but then as it blends with ordinary parts, it kind of degrades into anger. But usually within anger, there's some clarity there. There's some truth that's blended with a lot of intensity and emotion. So if we can find ways that anger is not held as real and true, but is given container, which is different than being like, I'm just gonna be freaking angry in the world and be angry at whoever I want and they gotta containerize me. That's a child's view. We aren't children that demand that everyone be our container in every moment. But we do have an intelligence that understands that anger does need receiving and that we can consciously choose to receive it. And you can even grow a superpower in yourself that when people are angry in the world and they don't know this thing about the need for receiving, you could consciously give a container to people when they're needing it. You could just show up and be like, I'm gonna, and I have to say, I'm a highly, highly, highly sensitive person. I feel when you blink or if you think something a little bit funny about me, my system knows because I'm that sensitive and that interconnected. And so I have to say it was a really empowering thing for me to learn. I did this with my ex-partner as we were clearing stuff from our past relationship. I just sat with him, faced him, and let him go for it. Everything he wanted to tell me he was pissed about, everything I ever did in our 7 years together. I sat there and I like really breathed in and I took in what he was saying and I didn't resist it. I didn't worry about what was true or not true. I just really took it in. And as it went in, I felt these little truths that were there, mixed with untruths, but I didn't resist, I received. And it was bizarre, but it was a pleasurable experience, you guys. Totally blew my mind. What? It could feel good to receive anger? I had no idea that the resistance of it was what was causing all the pain. When I actually opened and didn't resist and just, in my own more awakened ground, just took in and received. And this is a little bit dicey for me to reveal, but it almost felt like a sexual experience. It was so pleasurable. It was like, whoa, I've been running from this my whole life. And then when I sat there and like took in and let it happen without resistance, it became a simultaneous mind experience. It got so blissful. And then that person, as they shared, they felt received and all that expression that just needed someone to hear it, whether it was based on their child parts or not, it felt received and it calmed. And there was this deep connection that happened. And there was this resolution feeling. And then from it, we could be like, well, what was really true in there? And then, I could have my stream back. Okay, now you do that for me because I got everything in the past 7 years that you did with me, right? So I just want to say that that's one example of when emotion is given the container that actually honors it and uses that wisdom of water, of receiving, of embracing, of not resisting, but actually opening. That emotion, it's sort of like the rage and the power and all that energy, it finds a place to become a calm stream. Like it pours down the mountain and then it becomes the lake, right? So that's a need. And that's with anger. And then the other one that I think is just as important, and this came a lot from my many years in the co-counseling community, the reevaluation community. They taught, I'm just going to pause because I've been saying a lot. Let me just breathe with you guys. I have so much and the time is a little pressurizing me. So, hi. You guys good? You good? You with me? Whew. It's hard for me not to feel time pressure sometimes. I have so much I want to share and the time is never quite enough. Whew. Okay. Thank you. I feel you. More connection. Yeah. So So one thing I want to say is if you watch children, little children, boys and girls the same, what happens when Johnny falls at the park and scrapes his knee? What does he do? Yeah, say that out loud, Jeremy. Unmute yourself.
Ah!
Right. So when Johnny's at the park, he scrapes himself before he's been conditioned that boys shouldn't cry and that he's a sissy if he does that. Johnny just goes, right? There is a natural mechanism that if you look at children, it hasn't been conditioned out of them. And in co-counseling, they called it the discharge process. It's how our nervous system releases impact. And so what happens is when we have experience, we have all these beautiful mechanisms, like the ability to cry and scream and shake. Peter Levine talks about this in his book with, it's called Waking the Tiger.
Yes.
Where like the deer, it's like running, he's gonna get killed, and somehow he makes it. But then after it's gone, the animal like shakes off all of that energy that got created in the terror of I might die. And then he's able to like restore and be like a normal antelope again and be relaxed and eat grass. So we are designed as animal bodies to discharge our emotion and our energy. But what happened is our society conditioned us out of it. And part of the way they conditioned us out of it is they didn't respond. That's the still-faced experiment. The baby is like crying. And if someone doesn't come and co-regulate with them, it's too freaking painful. There's too much anguish. It's too absolutely traumatizing. So the baby still faces and loses its discharge process. That's one of the places this happens. Another place this happens is our society. I think what happened is there was a bunch of people who, when they were babies, weren't responded to, and then they became adults and they created a culture. And now that they're hardened and shut down because they didn't get responded to as babies, they tell you to shut up when you cry. Don't be a little baby. Stop crying. Go in the corner. Shut up. And then especially those same people who got so hardened that they couldn't feel and they weren't in the interconnected, then they got into industrial complexes and wars. And then, okay, we need warriors here. So you need even less feeling, harden even more. We create little soldiers. Men need to not feel or cry, because how the hell am I going to get them to work 40 hours a week and kill other people for me? Right? You with me? So what happened is there's a population of people who innocent themselves somehow got cut off from their own felt sense. And that generated actions that were from people who were hardened from their felt sense. And they created industrial complexes and warring zones. And then they had to create people who could live within those complexes. So then we got culturally stronger to condition people to not feel themselves, because it would be really hard if people felt their own bodies to make them work 40 hours a week in cubicles or in industrial environments. People wouldn't be able to do that if they could feel themselves. Do you get that? I just need to hear a little sound. It's too much silence for me.
Yeah.
Yes.
You guys get that?
Yes. Yeah.
Got this.
Right?
Yeah.
And people would be able to kill each other
Yes.
if they could feel themselves. That's why if you look at the military, you see this way that the body is held, where there's almost no flow, almost no life force. There's this straight body that moves more like a machine, because that blocks the sensation of feeling. Because how the hell are you going to shoot another frightened, vulnerable human being if you're in your felt sense?
And Elisa,
Yeah.
what you're saying is really beautiful. Will you slow down as you go and invite everyone to feel? Because it's the information's all organizing.
Yeah, thank you. I know I'm a little hyper. It's my own time pressures inside of me right now. So everybody feel what happens when you live in a culture that first years ago, parents were told that when a baby cries, don't respond. And then that same culture told children to shut up and be quiet. Right? And that same culture told young growing boys as they were growing into men that they were acting like girls if they cried or had feelings, that they were being sissies. Don't be a girl, right? And even in modern day, it got so much cooler to be the distorted masculine that all the women started to act like that. Like, oh, we want to be in the society, we want to fit in, so now I'm going to be masculine and I'm not going to feel. I'm going to show up in my business suit and put away my feelings because I want to be part of the power group. To feel what's happened to us. And feel how water, which is asking to bring us back to the felt sense and to ask us to find our way to go back to that natural mechanism, which is to feel and to discharge our emotions, to be able to cry so that the hardness can soften, to be able to express our emotions so that they don't compress our bodies, right? Water is the invitation to be in the warm, loving, receiving presence of the entire emotional range. And water can be compassionate for the bodies among us who can't even cry anymore, because we understand that it was created through trauma, that it's not someone's fault that they can't feel or can't cry. It's actually a deeper form of trauma. But what I want to say is we need to get this skill back. We need to be able to feel our emotions. And we need spaces where we can regain this capacity, because through our vulnerability, through our ability to discharge emotion and energy, through our ability to feel, we are opening to our capacity to feel, sense, love, connect with each other. Am I going slow enough, Kristen? I notice myself looking to you.
Yeah, because it organizes in our tissues.
Yeah.
And you're right there. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So what we're going to do, the time, is so one of the teachings of water is about emotion without story. A lot of us are used to telling the story and weather reporting rather than just dropping in and crying or shaking or screaming or laughing. Like, this is what co-counseling taught me many years ago, is you need to get beneath the story and actually let the natural discharge process occur. And for most of us, that actually is a lost capacity. Some of us still have it, but many of us have lost it. So it's actually something we have to practice with each other. Can we not talk about it, but can we literally, in someone else's presence, just allow the feeling and the emotion to move and the crying to happen and the shaking to happen and the yelling, whatever that is? Like, can we just be in the emotion without anything between it? Raw immediacy now. Okay. And it's still allowing. It's not a forcing. It isn't to act emotion. It isn't to make yourself cry. It's through presence, what is here, with the intent to allow emotion to occur. Okay. Is there anything you want to add, Kristen? I can feel you there, right on the fence with me.
I'm just feeling that when you were streaming and all that information was coming through quickly, what you were pointing to around in a way, the override of the feeling body, and then how that organizes into I can't feel, I can't look, I can't sense another, I can't look inward, like the rigid process that's really in the Western cultural paradigm, and this tightness that becomes a defensive overlay and in our tissues that pushes against even getting under all that, to have the fortitude or the tone in our nervous systems to be able to stay with what is under-resourced, or what is like hypertonic, what is in overdrive.
Yeah, and when you learn to process your emotions, then you have capacity for other people's emotions. It gives you resilience and buoyancy.
Yeah.
Because when you're rigid and caught in the freeze or the overlay, you actually that's where the fragility comes from the inability to feel yourself. It's fragile. Yeah. So what I want to do, they're supposed to have a break, but I'm gonna extend it. Or should I give them a break and then we do it?
We're going to last.
I know.
Let's just do it.
Let's just do it. Okay. So breakouts. So we have a couple minutes. Is there a breakout person? We're going to do pairs. So what we're going to do is we're going to hold space for each other. The person who's the container holder is going to use all of their air, water skills of awareness and presence and warmth and connection and embrace and receiving. If the person wants to do anger, I suggest you add earth. You're going to need a little more ground, and then you want to go even more receptive. You can let your person know if you're ready to be with anger. I want to give you a choice because there is some training there. But what I notice is when someone's angry, I can just celebrate it. Be like, oh, how angry are you? Keep showing me. Oh, how mad. So that's your choice. And then the person who's going, your goal is discharge. Your goal is not to talk about it, not to think about it. You're just supposed to find something where you feel charge in your body still. Maybe there's an incident or something that you can connect to. And your goal is to just let your body, to find the crying, to find the shaking, to find the sound, whatever it is, it's discharge is your goal. Okay? And then we'll change sides. And I'd like to do 5 minutes. 5 minutes aside. So we'll do 11-minute breakout.
And then go to lunch.
And then it's not lunch, then it's a break. Yeah. And then we'll have a break after that.
I have a question.
So,
do you have any tips for coming out of freezing?
Yeah. So for some of you, you've got the wound where you can't discharge. And that is totally just letting you know that you've been traumatized in that way. So what you do is you are just absolutely present with numbness or with freeze. You just hang there noticing, I can't even talk. Like I was doing this discharge process and I went into catatonic for a few minutes. And at that moment I felt like I was in the collective body and I was in the catatonic of all the people in the pandemic who were so overwhelmed they couldn't get off the couch. So that is a discharge. I was like deeply in the felt experience of I cannot move. That is still discharge. When awareness is directly with an experience, even if the experience is a freeze, it is processing it and metabolizing it.
Can I add one thing there?
Mm-hmm.
So often in the freeze, things are like opposing forces are coupled and there's an overwhelm and they lock and then we can't feel. So you can also check, like, is there a sad mad? There's a collapse and a fight on top of each other, and then our systems blow out into numb. So what Annalisa said is just right. We get bigger and be able to presence the numb. And once you're there, you might be able to start to feel like, oh, wow, there's a clamp and there's something rising. Things that are paired and start rocking between them a little bit.
Oscillating, yeah. And the other thing that Kristen emphasized, I want to re-emphasize. So when co-counseling taught me, they actually just taught me the discharge. But Luminous does this a little different than co-counseling because we do it from the ground of awareness. So my experience now when I discharge, because I'm in the ground of awareness, sometimes I'm discharging the most freaking intense emotions you could possibly imagine, but there's a relaxation in it because I'm actually, as awareness, processing it. It's a simultaneous skill. So if you can do that, just remember awareness as being the emotion, which is different than only the emotion. Okay? All right, are we ready, breakout person?
I am like 15 seconds away. We just had a last minute.
Okay, no problem.
Can I ask a 15-second question?
Yeah.
When it's easy to hold space and not take it personally, it's easy. And when it's not easy, do you have ideas for that?
Well, right now, the process that we are doing with container is we ask that people don't discharge about us. So meaning like in this container, we use the discharge process where, hey, I can hold space for your feelings about someone else. It's a whole nother level to be able to do that when someone has feelings about you. That's like a higher skill set. So first do this skill set and we can build towards that other one.
Okay.
That's a more advanced skill set.
Okay.
I think this is the wax on, wax off to get to that skill set.
Gotcha. Thanks.